Hey everyone, this is Chris.
And Lorenzo.
And welcome to our Best of Saturday series. Now that we have hundreds of episodes, we get a lot of listeners asking us where to start.
So we'll be selecting some of our most popular episodes to share each Saturday from our years of podcasting. We hope you enjoy it.
No role plays, just real. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader.
We've never really, as a workforce, spent a lot of time on making sure we're developing good leaders.
We'll be able to share stories, experience, mistakes, failures, successes.
This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, today I would like to talk about the concept of indispensability versus being essential. And I got this concept from an article that I found on Reddit, in the leadership forum on Reddit. It was written by a man named, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this correctly, Olivier Fortier. He's a French-Canadian man, and he wrote a really cool article on this. And it's something that kind of resonated with me because I've encountered this in my life, and the feeling is very different between the two. Even though they might seem very similar on the surface. And I'll read the first paragraph of his article, and we'll link to it at the in the podcast description so you can read the entire thing, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. He says, "Have you ever caught yourself thinking, I should become indispensable at work to ensure my job security? You're not alone. It's a human self-preservation reflex. We all want to be recognized as someone who brings a unique and unmatched value to our companies. However, being indispensable differs from being essential, not only in definition, but also in how to reach this state." Interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering, have you ever had somebody in your life or in your companies that you've worked for that was indispensable? Have you ever had people that were essential? And do you know what the inherent difference between the two is?
I feel that I know what the difference is. In reflecting and listening to you talk about this, in my line of work in kind of retail leadership, it's very rare that I would say that somebody is completely indispensable. I think you've got people that are really good at their job. I think you've got people that have tenure and are able to provide insight and perspective that is very, very valuable. I just think that the word indispensable is very rare, just because most of us, if the door's closed tonight, the door's open tomorrow. And if there's any major change or a person leaves the business for whatever the reasons are, or they're sick, like kind of the show continues to go on. I will, however, share an example where I did actually become aware of somebody who was indispensable to a business. And that happened many years ago in the state of Florida here. For a large organization to be able to provide, installations in people's homes. So like they want to install, televisions, they want to be able to install home theater systems, things like that, even potentially appliances that require some elements of electrical work. You're required to have an electrician's license, which is, that's common sense. However, what's unique in Florida is that an organization cannot hold that license. An individual has to hold that license. And there was a time when the organization was eliminating jobs and becoming more efficient, and the job that they were eliminating and offering severance for was a job where an individual held that position, and they were the one who held the license.
Was the license part of the job that he was doing, or is it just coincidence?
It was coincidence. I think there was intent behind it because the organization knew that they needed somebody to have this license. So my belief is that they recruited him and hired him for that reason. So it wasn't a requirement of the job, but it was definitely something that the organization needed. And so the day before this person was supposed to have the last day with the organization, somebody realized that if that person was no longer employed by the organization, they would not be able to do any of these installations throughout the entire state of Florida. And they caught it last minute, and then they had to have a conversation with that employee, and that employee stayed with the organization. They found a position for him and offered him a new role, a different role, to be able to allow him to stay with the organization and utilize the license that he had. So that's the only time I can think of my entire career in retail leadership where I was well aware that somebody was truly, in fact, indispensable in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that you caught that, or that someone caught that at the last minute. And you're right, it could have been a serious problem. I think according to the article, people can become indispensable intentionally or involuntarily. So you could have situations like what you just described, that's involuntarily. That guy wasn't, I'm going to put myself in a position to be indispensable by being the only person who has a license. It just coincidentally happened that way. He probably didn't even think about it when he was being laid off. He probably didn't say, hey, by the way, if you get rid of me, you guys are in trouble. Probably didn't even realize it.
Yeah, I would completely agree.
Yeah, so there's that. And then there are people who put themselves in positions to be indispensable on purpose. And that could be a problem too. And so in the author of the article works as a leader of people, but the people he leads are software developers. And in the people that I have dealt with in IT teams across many organizations, there are a lot of examples I can think of where people are indispensable, both involuntarily and voluntarily. They make themselves indispensable. In my personal life, I do a lot of web development work with a partner. And I don't know web development myself very well, very, very little of it, but he's amazing at it. And my business model for a lot of my consulting practice is in the software as a service model. So I develop and implement software tools for organizations that help them become more transparent and help employees talk to each other and create a better working environment for employees. And he kind of takes my vision on all this stuff and makes it really come to life. And he is absolutely indispensable to me at the moment. Not intentionally. He didn't, find ways of making sure I never spoke with anybody else. I just started using him many, many years ago, and we've had a great relationship, and he's reasonably priced and does fantastic work. And now it is 15 years later, and I'm still using the same person. And if he were hit by a bus tomorrow, I would be in a serious world of hurt. And about once a month or so, I think about that, and I think, I should start looking for other people just to make sure that I can continue working if something bad were to happen, because you obviously you hope it doesn't happen, but life happens. And I every time I think about that, I think it's going to be so difficult. It's hard to make happen, to get somebody up to speed on everything that I've done without saying I want to pay you money, and I don't want to take any business away from this guy because I like his work. And so I'm stuck between this rock and a hard place right now that I would like to get out of, and I'm trying to figure out ways to get around it or get out of it. But at the moment, he is an indispensable person in my life. And that's a little bit scary. But there are companies all over that have indispensable people. Both they put themselves that way in order to make themselves not be able to get fired or lose their job. And just because it's easy when someone really knows how to do something well to not try to backfill that role, to not have to backfill it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So there are companies right now that deal with this, and it's hurting them to be in that position long term, to have people in their organizations that are indispensable.
Yeah, I think to your point with, the thought of, wow, look at all the work I would have to do to get somebody up to speed and to prepare myself, for if something was to happen. I think that to me, from an indispensable standpoint, like that is truly the danger is if you're a leader and you are thinking about or if your perception or perspective is that you have people that are indispensable and you're doing nothing about it, that's a very dangerous place to be, because you're creating that environment where you're allowing what they know or what they do to be a driving factor in how you get work done. And in a case like yours, where you have a great relationship, the guy does fantastic work, you're really happy with him, everything is gravy until he can't do the work anymore. And that now you're in a space where you got to get somebody up to speed very quickly and build through that relationship and kind of start over again. In a situation where you have people that are the only ones who know how to do certain work, or they're really good at it, and as a leader, you give them a pass on other things and say, they're kind of a pain. They don't really do that well. Sometimes they snap at people. Sometimes they're late, or they show up when they want to, or they give me an attitude. But you allow it because they do something very, very well, or they're the only person who knows how to do something, or use a software or a process. that's where it's really, really, really dangerous, because then you're creating a culture where you're allowing these behaviors, and in fact, you're protecting those negative behaviors by keeping that person employed.
Yeah, the author of the article goes further to talk about how that contrasts with an employee who is essential. So not indispensable, but essential. And he says the fundamental difference with the portrait of an indispensable person compared to the essential person is that the person who is indispensable wants to become useful to an extreme, while the person trying to become essential aims at being useless. And that's interesting. When I first read that, okay, that's kind of an interesting way of characterizing it, but it makes perfect sense. The essential person believes they should share their know-how and social skills with as many people as possible. They're altruistic. And so it goes back to a fundamental belief that there are some people out there who try to hoard power. They feel like when they have the power, that's the more power they seek to have, they feel more powerful. In my lifetime, in my professional career, the people that I've encountered that are the most powerful, the truly most powerful, meaning they wield influence, not just authority, but influence, are the people who they shun power whenever they get a chance to. They give away credit at a moment's notice. If they know how to do something, they actively try to get other people involved in that so that other people know how to do what they're doing as well. They're almost excited by the prospect of sharing what they know with their coworkers and with the world. And those people are the essential people, not because the business would close its doors if they were to go away tomorrow, but because there would be almost a hole in the heart of the business if they went away tomorrow. And that's a very different feeling than a person who, if they were gone tomorrow, you'd have to close the doors of your business. One evokes fear as a leader. If you're the business owner, you don't want the indispensable person because your livelihood depends on it. The other invokes a sense of wanting to make the environment as great as possible for these people so that they continue to share their knowledge with the world.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I know we've spoken about it before in regards to social leadership and, bringing people up to speed so that they can be the best version of themselves. That's really powerful when you think about creating culture. I think to go deeper into your point, so if you have an individual who is really good at maybe producing a result or let's just say, for the sake of argument, selling something. So this person is the number one person at selling this widget. Okay, well, there are other people that sell a widget, but this person is the best of them. Well, if that person goes away tomorrow, there may be a gap to fix because you may effectively sell less widgets tomorrow. But from a team standpoint, when you have other people that do that job and you say to them, hey, this person is no longer here, we need to work, together to fill that gap while we bring another person onto the team to also help sell these widgets. Many times the team will rise to the occasion because that's what they already do. You're just asking them to do more and to work together to fill that gap. When the person who leaves is somebody who is a part of the culture, who is somebody who, to your point, gives away credit, is a resource, is a shoulder to cry on, really emits the values of the organization, is there for people, makes people's job easier because makes them happier and makes them enjoying coming to work. Well, when that person is no longer in the organization, that's a big void to fill, and that's not easily delegated. Somebody has to naturally want to step into that role. Somebody has to fill that void. And that's usually in most environments when there is a culture shift or when overall productivity goes down or people feel more confused or people feel, that they're not getting the support that they need because that individual was somebody who was truly essential to the culture of the business and their actions and behaviors were such that it motivated people, inspired people to do better. By choice versus by force.
Yeah, I think that's true. It also made me think of something else too, and that's that I think there are leaders out there who take the example that you had, the example that you gave of the guy who's really good at selling the widgets, right?
Mm-hmm.
That person, by the true definition, isn't really indispensable. But I mean, aren't there leaders out there that I think kind of in their own minds, they characterize that person as indispensable, and it hurts them.
Oh, absolutely. You see it all the time. You see it all the time. When you know you're seeing it and hearing it when somebody says something like, "Oh, that's just Chris," but he says a lot of these. "Oh, well, that's just how Chris is." That's your red flag to know that they see you as somebody who adds value somewhere else, and they're making excuses for your behavior. And that means to them, in their mind, you're indispensable because they're willing to allow you to do these things as long as you produce that thing that they want you to go produce.
Right. They're basically saying, I mean, every employee has the good and the bad, but if a person is viewed as indispensable, they are more likely to get away with doing bad things because they are viewed as indispensable, even when they're not actually indispensable.
Absolutely. That's the most dangerous part is I can understand that due to like the author's example in software design, where if the company has moved on to a new software and maybe there's an old one and that one person really knows that old software, they're the only one left, and you've got accounts that use that old software. Like, I can understand that, where you're kind of like, man, we've got to figure this part out because it's not easy to go out and find somebody who knows old software. I get that. But I think in our environment and in the vast majority of working environments, there are not that many people in an organization or a team that are truly indispensable. It's just our perception, or we believe that they are, because we don't want to do the hard work to bring everybody else or another person up to speed on what you need them to do to deliver at that type of productivity or efficiency.
The problem can seem bigger than it actually is if you are convincing yourself that you have indispensable people that aren't really indispensable. And I feel like I've been in situations. In fact, we had an episode last year sometime about toxic people in the work environment. And the example I had, there was a person that worked for me, and they were incredible at merchandising and making sure the shelves were filled and pricing, and they were just a jerk to be around. and I made excuses for them. I hyped them up in my own mind as being indispensable when they were not. If I got rid of them because they were a drain on the culture of the team, what would have happened? Well, I would have had to find someone else that was just as passionate about doing the non-people work as this person was. And would it have been difficult? Sure. But the door still would have opened the next day and everything would have been fine. It was a laziness on my part to allow it to happen for as long as it did, because it was easier to deal with the intangible negatives that they brought to the team than the very tangible, very quantifiable gaps in the merchandising and the stocking and the inventory that I would have noticed in my day-to-day for the few weeks that it would have taken to get him replaced.
Yep, I completely agree. And with that, it's time for this episode's 1 Minute Hack.
The 1 Minute Hack.
Okay, for this episode's 1 Minute Hack, I want you to take a pen and paper, and I want you to write down a list of all the people who report to you. And then I want you to characterize them as essential or indispensable, or neither. If they are neither, that's okay too. But figure out who on your team is indispensable, and figure out whether they are actually indispensable, or if you just are characterizing them as indispensable because it enables you to not get rid of a person that needs to go away. And if it's the first one, if they are truly indispensable, they have a skill or they have a license that they need to have that no one else has, something that is truly indispensable, your doors would close without them. The first priority for you is going to be to make sure that you eliminate that indispensability. I'm not saying eliminate the person, but make sure that you have redundancy in place as soon as possible, because the stress that will relieve from you as a leader of not having that in the back of your mind nagging at you, that's going to be huge in terms of your ability to move forward, or to, at the very least, to feel like you can judge that person accurately on their performance and not be hindered in your conversations with them by the fact that you really can't have them leave. So start there. and make sure that you get as many of your people over to the essential column as possible and out of the indispensable column.
I think it's a great 1 minute hack, and it's really necessary work. As we talked about throughout this entire episode, understanding, realizing that the vast majority of people that you may feel are indispensable are not really indispensable, and that's kind of in your head, and it's really just a hurdle of knowing that you don't want to have to go do the heavy lifting and the hard work. Like having that self-reflection moment, I strongly believe is going to be critical to being able to show up differently as a leader and really push your culture forward and produce a lot better productivity, efficiency, and at the end of the day, much better culture when the approach to your team is not that way, and those people that may feel that they are indispensable based on your behavior as a leader are no longer have the power of negativity that mostly happens in your organization.
Yeah, depending on the industry that you're in. So we have listeners that are in retail leadership, they're in software leadership, they're in highly technical skilled leadership, engineering, architecture, all over
Military.
the place.
Yep.
Military, yes. Depending on the industry you're in, will determine how many people that you find are actually indispensable versus ones where you're just telling yourself they're indispensable when they're really not. And the ones that are actually indispensable, that might be a tougher problem to fix, but it still needs to be fixed. The people who you're just telling yourself they're indispensable, get out of that mindset, because it will allow you to make sure you have the right people working for you.
Yep, I completely agree. And with that, it brings us to the end of another episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you guys next time.